Every move they've been making feels calculated, feels smarter. And honestly, it feels like the front office finally has a real long-term plan instead of just reacting year by year. And the crazy part is, while everybody's focused on the big names leaving, Seattle might actually be putting themselves in an even better position for the future without falling apart in the present. There's a lot to unpack here because some of these decisions are way bigger than they look on the surface. So before we dive in, smash that like button if you're riding with the Seahawks no matter what, and drop "Go Hawks" down in the comments so I know the real 12s are here with us today. The Seattle Seahawks just got the kind of news that could quietly shape the future of this franchise for years, and somehow it feels like not enough people are talking about how massive this really is. Right now, the NFL's latest compensatory pick projections for the 2027 NFL Draft are pointing towards Seattle receiving 4 extra draft picks, including a 4th-rounder and 3 5th-round selections. And when you really start breaking down how John Schneider positioned this roster to make that happen, while still keeping the Seahawks competitive right now, you begin to understand the bigger vision that's unfolding in Seattle. This is not accidental. This is not luck. This is calculated roster construction from a front office that clearly learned lessons from previous eras of Seahawks football. The organization is balancing the present and the future at the same time, and honestly, it's one of the smartest off-seasons Seattle has had in years. The biggest projected compensatory selection comes from Boy Mafe, leaving in free agency and signing a 3-year, $60 million contract with the Cincinnati Bengals. And look, this is where emotions and smart football decisions sometimes collide. Mafe was a solid player for Seattle. Nobody is saying he was a bust or somebody that couldn't contribute. He absolutely had value on this team. There were moments where he flashed real pass-rushing ability, and there's a reason the Bengals paid him that kind of money. But the Seahawks looked at the situation differently. Seattle understood that paying premium money to a player they viewed as good but not elite could become a long-term problem. Instead of overcommitting financially, they trusted their scouting department, trusted their ability to replace production, and trusted their roster-building process. That decision is now projected to reward them with a 4th-round compensatory pick, while also giving them flexibility to improve elsewhere on the roster. What makes this even more impressive is that Seattle didn't just let Mafe walk and hope for the best. They immediately addressed the position by bringing in Dante Fowler Jr., a move that many fans believe could actually end up being an upgrade in the short term. So now the Seahawks are potentially maintaining similar production at edge rusher while also adding future draft capital. That's the type of move championship-caliber organizations make consistently. And honestly, when you zoom out and look at the entire off-season strategy, it becomes clear Seattle kept repeating this same formula over and over again. Take Kenneth Walker, for example. That was one of the tougher emotional decisions for Seahawks fans, because Walker was exciting. He was electric with the football in his hands. He was homegrown talent, and fans connected with him because he brought energy every single week. But football decisions cannot always be emotional decisions, especially when contracts start reaching elite market numbers. Walker reportedly landed a 3-year, $43 million deal after leaving Seattle, and that's where the Seahawks drew the line. The front office clearly decided they were not willing to pay top 5 running back money in an offense that doesn't rely entirely on one superstar runner. That's important because the NFL continues to show that teams can find productive running backs through the draft, through rotational systems, and through smart value signings instead of huge contracts. Seattle already appears confident in the replacements they assembled. The team added younger and cheaper options while continuing to build depth at the position. Instead of committing massive money to Walker, they're betting on player development, scheme fit, and roster flexibility. And once again, that move is projected to bring back another compensatory selection in the 5th round. What's fascinating is that this strategy isn't about waving the white flag on winning now. That's the key detail. Seattle is not rebuilding in the traditional sense. They are restructuring how they maintain long-term competitiveness. John Schneider appears determined to avoid the mistakes that shortened the Seahawks' original championship window during the Legion of Boom era. Back then, Seattle had an incredible roster loaded with elite talent. But eventually, the financial realities caught up to them. The Seahawks won one Super Bowl, reached another, and then the roster slowly became harder and harder to sustain. Expensive contracts, aging players, and roster turnover eventually broke apart what could have potentially been a longer dynastic run. Now, it feels like Schneider is trying to build something more sustainable. And the Kobe Bryant situation may be one of the clearest examples of that philosophy in action. Kobe Bryant became a valuable player for Seattle after transitioning into a safety role and earning a starting job. Fans respected the way he developed and embraced his role on the defense. Losing him wasn't easy because he became part of the identity of this secondary. But again, Seattle looked at the bigger picture. Bryant reportedly signed a 3-year, $40 million contract elsewhere, and the Seahawks decided they could replace that production internally while preserving cap flexibility and gaining future draft compensation. The organization clearly believes in Tai Okada, whose development throughout the season quietly impressed coaches and evaluators. When comparing the two players statistically, the gap was not nearly as large as some fans might assume. Seattle also doubled down on that confidence during the draft by selecting Bud Clark, a player the organization appears extremely high on. And this is where things get really interesting because the Seahawks are not just replacing players anymore. They're replacing them proactively before the roster ever declines. That's the difference. Instead of waiting until positions become weaknesses, Seattle is constantly preparing the next wave of talent. Bud Clark might not immediately become the same player Kobe Bryant was, but the Seahawks believe his upside could eventually exceed it. He's younger, cheaper, and gives Seattle developmental flexibility while they continue building depth throughout the secondary. And then there's the Riq Woolen situation, which honestly might be the most important example of this entire offseason strategy. Everyone knew Woolen entering free agency was going to attract major attention around the league because of his physical traits. Big-bodied corners with elite length and athleticism simply don't grow on trees in the NFL. Even after a slightly inconsistent season statistically, teams still viewed him as a high-upside defensive back capable of thriving in the right system. The Philadelphia Eagles saw that upside and reportedly signed Woolen to a 1-year, $15 million deal. But once again, Seattle had already prepared for this possibility. Instead of panicking, the Seahawks retained Josh Jobe, a player the coaching staff clearly trusts. Throughout last season, Jobe and Woolen battled for opportunities, and there were stretches where the difference between the two didn't feel massive at all. Seattle believes Jobe can hold down the position effectively while they continue developing younger talent behind him. And that's where third-round pick Julian Neal enters the picture. The Seahawks targeted Neal because he fits exactly what this defense values physically and mentally. He's aggressive, physical, willing to challenge receivers, and has the kind of size Seattle covets at cornerback. Even if he doesn't immediately become a full-time starter this season, the organization clearly sees him as part of the long-term blueprint for the secondary. So now, when you add all of this together, you start to see the complete vision unfold. Seattle is allowing expensive players to leave when the contracts no longer match the organization's valuation. They are replacing those players with younger, cheaper talent internally or through the draft. And while doing all of that, they're collecting additional draft capital that can continue feeding the roster for years to come. That's how teams stay competitive long-term in today's NFL. And maybe the most important part of all this is the timing. Because now that the NFL draft has concluded, free agent signings no longer impact the compensatory formula. That means Seattle can still aggressively pursue veteran additions without risking the extra picks they've already positioned themselves to receive. That's enormous flexibility for a front office that clearly wants to compete immediately while also protecting the future. This is why so many Seahawks fans are suddenly feeling optimistic about where this franchise is heading. It feels organized. It feels intentional. It feels like Seattle finally has a long-term roster management strategy built around sustainability instead of desperation. The Seahawks are projected to receive 4 compensatory picks in the 2027 NFL Draft, and while some teams treat those selections like afterthoughts, Seattle is treating them like part of a much bigger championship formula. The front office is betting that smart roster turnover, strong drafting, and financial discipline will keep this team relevant for far longer than one short Super Bowl window. And now, Seahawks fans, this is where things get really exciting. Because if John Schneider keeps stacking draft capital while still keeping this roster competitive, Seattle could be setting itself up for another serious championship window sooner than people expect. But I want to hear from you. Do you agree with the way the Seahawks handled these free agency losses, or do you think they should have kept some of these players long-term? Drop your thoughts down in the comments, because this debate is only getting bigger across the fan base. And if you want Seahawks news, rumors, and behind-the-scenes analysis before everyone else is talking about it, make sure you subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the video, and click the video that's on your screen right now. The fastest Seahawks updates are always right here.